back up and restore virtual machines. I bet you're looking at this, the title of this nugget and thinking, this is easy. You're probably thinking that because, well, the entire process of backing up and restoring computers has, for a very long time, been one of those, I don't know, not terribly difficult. If I don't have to restore the whole computer, well, it's not that bad. If I need to restore an individual file, well, all I need to do is go to my tape backup device and grab the file, and it's good to go. Well, in virtualization, and with virtual machines, the whole backup and restore process gets much, much more complicated. Part of that is a problem that I like to call perspective. In virtual environments, as I'll explain in just a minute, there are more places in which a backup can be sourced from. There are more perspectives from which that backup can actually occur. And so because of that perspective problem, the whole notion of backup and restore virtual machines gets much more complicated than would it in the physical world. Now, we have to talk about perspective because, well, we're eventually going to get to this whole notion of VMware data recovery, which is a tool that is packaged with vSphere that is a part of the vSphere family that allows you to do data recovery on virtual machines. And we'll go through the process of installing and configuring it and doing a backup job and doing a restore. But before we actually get there, I want to spend just a minute kind of talking about, well, all right, so what is this notion of perspective? I got a picture here. This is a variation of a picture that I use all the time when I talk about backups in virtual environments. And it's this nice stacked diagram here that relates to, all right, I got storage and server hardware, and I got the hypervisor here, and I got some device drivers that are in my hypervisor and a management OS. And I got the virtual machine that's sitting on top. And so this gives you a nice idea of the stack of different technologies that are required in order to create a virtual environment. Now, we have at this point been focusing fairly heavily on getting these VMs up and running up here at the top by getting all the configurations here with the hypervisor put together. But you'll notice that there are a lot of layers to this picture. And I've got my server hardware, the physical piece of hardware on which the hypervisor is installed. That server hardware plugs into a set of storage underneath it, and then the hypervisor sits on top of it with, some management functionality here. I call it an OS, but it's management functionality there, and then some device drivers. And I have to have all these pieces in place before I can actually get to running those virtual machines. You've already experienced this through the series of nuggets that it's taken to get us this far. If you were thinking earlier on that it just takes a lot of steps before I can actually even create a new virtual machine, you're right, because, well, I've got to get the infrastructure in place. Now, these infrastructure pieces also highlight the fact that there are multiple locations from which a backup can be sourced from. Here in the virtual machine, I could put an agent in that virtual machine and just install a little agent down here. And that agent would operate in much the same way that the agents operate in a physical environment today. I drop a backup agent in my physical computer, and it backs up the 70 million files that make up the Windows operating system, and it goes onto tape or disk. Now, this is nice because if I need to restore one of those files, Stan in accounting loses his spreadsheet again. Gosh, Stan, again this week? Well, I'm going to have to go back to the tape and find the spreadsheet. At least it's one file at a time, so I can restore it very easily back to the VM where he lost it from. But the problem is, with all those files separated in the way that they are, well, if I need to restore the entire computer, this is difficult. Ever had to do a whole computer restore? Right? Ever had to, oops, the Exchange server's dead. I've got to go restore it from backups. Well, what do you have to do? You have to find exactly the same computer that you had before. If it was the motherboard that died on the Exchange server, you got a problem. You got to go find another motherboard, and you got to go install an OS, and then put whatever service pack is on it, get the agent back on it, and then ultimately go back and restore all the files, layer them over the top, so you can create the same kind of thing that was at the moment that VM was, or that machine was backed up. So individual files, easy on a VM. Whole computer is much more difficult. If I put the agent somewhere else, maybe in the hypervisor, Okay, back with the original ESX, I could do that. I can install software directly into my hypervisor, or maybe outside of the hypervisor via some third-party mechanism. And that third party can be VMware's data recovery tool, or it can be a third party, an actual third party mechanism that integrates with these management OS features. Well, in that location, it's looking up at the virtual machine. It sees a pair of VMDK files, one for each VM here, and it says, all right, I'm going to go and grab that VMDK file, and I'm going to suck it off of that machine and put a copy of it on tape or disk. So now I have one file in this situation on tape or disk down here, which is great for backups. I mean, I can, one file is easy to deal with as long as it's properly, the quiescence is done appropriately, and I've got the data is integral inside of that little mini database that is the VMDK file. But as long as I've got that, it's easy to back up. It's much more difficult to restore because I have to restore the entire VMDK and then somehow break into that VMDK to grab Stan's accounting spreadsheet and get it back onto the VM somewhere. So without some kinds of automation, the having it at the hypervisor level or outside can be somewhat challenging. I could even put it in the storage too if I wanted. Right? My storage would have to have some sort of integration also with the hypervisor, just like that third-party tool would, and it would grab the VMDK files and poof, I'm good to go. So all of these are really the different locations from where backups can be sourced from, the different perspectives that are available for solving the backup problem. Be familiar with them because depending on what you need, you're going to choose a different solution for that. Now, built into vCenter is this thing called virtual machine snapshots. And it's almost a misnomer for me to refer to snapshots in the backup and restore virtual machines nugget here, because snapshots are not a backup and restore tool. Repeat that over and over again. Snapshots are not a backup and restore tool. The problem is that the term snapshot is really, really overused today. And so you'll find that your virtual machine, your hypervisor vendor will use a type of snapshot, and your backup vendor will use a type of snapshot because it's kind of a convenient word. It's like Kleenex, right? It's a convenient word for something that you need as opposed to the word tissue. So I've got snapshots that can occur at the hypervisor level, and I got a backup solution that can do snapshots, and I got applications that can do snapshots. So I introduced this in the backup and restore VMs nugget because I want you to see what a snapshot is so that you can get it firmly entrenched into your mind as to what a snapshot is. Then you can flush it when we start thinking about real backups. Let me actually do that now. All right, here's this virtual machine. And if I right-click on this virtual machine, you'll see I've got all these options that we've looked at before. And one of them is the snapshot option. Okay, what is a snapshot? A snapshot is a mechanism to protect yourself from a resume-producing event. Right? You are about to go and do something stupid. And before you go and do something stupid or something you don't actually yet know is stupid, you go and you take a snapshot of that virtual machine, okay? Pre-stupid. And what you've done is you've snapshotted the virtual machine's memory. You may have even done some quiescing of the guest's file system. And it goes about accomplishing that task. You are creating what is effectively a picture, poof, of a certain period of time for that virtual machine's operation. Okay, and once that picture is taken, you can go and do whatever that stupid thing is that you're about to do. I don't know, apply a Microsoft patch or change a configuration that you're not exactly sure if it's a good idea or not, or any of those things kind of make you itch funny before you do them. So once you create that, once the snapshot is complete here, you can go and do whatever it is you need to do. And know that if something happens, you can go back to this snapshot manager here. And if whatever you do accidentally blue screens the computer, well, I can then roll back the snapshot and roll the computer back to that previous point in time. So let me go ahead and close this and then allow this to finish here with the last 5% or so. Once that snapshot has completed, okay, there it goes. And I go back to my snapshot manager. You'll see now I have a "You are here" dialog box. I am somewhere at the point after creating the pre-stupid snapshot. Now, I can actually go back to that location by clicking Go To, or I could even go back to here and choose Snapshot and revert to current snapshot, so roll backwards. I could consolidate in the existing snapshots, so if I have a whole bunch of them, tiered out, I could roll them all together. But what this does is it allows me to, again, do something, or take a snapshot, do something that I'm a little concerned about, and then when it's done, I can go back and delete that snapshot. Poof, it's deleted. Now, I introduced this to you because you got to be careful with these snapshots, and people get a little crazy with these things. Every time you create a snapshot, you're effectively creating another VMDK file, more or less. Right? And so the original VMDK file kind of goes into pause mode, and the new VMDK file is the one that starts to run. So when I delete the snapshot, I'm deleting the new VMDK file. You do not want to run with these snapshots for any period of time. Right? After you complete doing whatever it is that you're concerned about, get rid of the snapshots, because those snapshots can impact things like vMotion, and they can there's various different things that can be impacted by having a snapshot, not the least of which is backups. So snapshots themselves are not units of backup, but what they are is sort of protection devices. What is a backup is this whole VMware data recovery. One possible backup is this VMware data recovery thing. Now, as far as VMware data recovery is concerned, you can download this off of VMware's website. In fact, I have already, and I've connected it up here to the D drive of this computer. And you'll see VMware Data Recovery, and you'll see there's a recovery client plugin that I would plug into the vSphere client. I can also explore the media for additional components, right, for the appliance, for the just other stuff. Right, you'll see here, here's the VMware Restore client. Here is the OVF that is associated with the VMware Data Recovery appliance. The first thing I want to do here is I want to actually get to this VMware Data Recovery appliance and actually get it installed just like I would any, OVF thing that we talked about in that last nugget. So let me go here to File, and I want to deploy an OVF template just like I did before, and I want to deploy this from this location. So here's that data recovery OVF file. Right? This is 1 gigabyte thin provision, so it's very small. Here, there's the end user license agreement. We're going to call it VMware Data Recovery, put it on the cluster, just all the stuff that we're used to thinking of associated with creating a new virtual machine. I'm going to thin provision it. I'm going to map it to network 1 here. Set the time zone, and then ready to complete. So that's actually going to go about creating that VMware Data Recovery appliance. And as you can see there, it's deploying the disk now. This process isn't going to take very long because, as I said before, it's only about 1 gigabyte in size. Once it's done deploying, there's a little bit of configuration that's required. Now, this configuration can either happen on the console of this data recovery appliance, or you can access it via a web browser. But what I have done is create it as a separate virtual machine here. You see I got VMware Data Recovery, and to manage this VM, you can browse to this location, 192.168.0.195480. Down here, I can configure the network if I want. I can set the time zone if I want. There's really not that much to see. I can even log in if I want as root. Interestingly enough, the root password, if you are just fresh logging in, you've never logged in before, the root password, if I can type it in right, is vmw@re. So you don't have to look that up. If you want to log in and actually see what it looks like from the command line, that's what it looks like, vm@re. Now, most of us, however, are probably more, user interface friendly. So if we go to this 192.168.0.19 location here, I've actually brought this up so we can take a look at it. And you'll see if I punch in root and then vmw@re, I can log in. And now I can see all the fun information about this server. There's not much to do here because this is not really the interface for working with it. This is the interface for configuring it. I can reboot it. I can shut it down. I can set the time zone here if I want to, whatever makes sense for my time zone. And I can also set the network settings here. Right now it's just set to 192.168.0.19 because that's what my DHCP server has given it. But I can adjust this if I want. Okay, so all of this is really the information you would need in order to get this thing up and running on the network with the proxy information and address information. Now there's another client piece that's actually required in order to be successful with this thing, and that's the Data Recovery Client plugin. Let's actually install this. We click Next here and Next and go through all the usual stuff for installing the Data Recovery Client plugin. And once this is complete, it will actually install this Data Recovery Client plugin here into my vCenter environment. Okay, you'll see if I go to Manage Plugins and actually give it a minute to refresh, and you'll see that the VMware Data Recovery plugin is now installed and available for use here in the vSphere client. What it does actually is it adds here under this home list another solutions and applications node here called VMware Data Recovery. This plugin is essentially your connection from vSphere client into the appliance, the VMware Data Recovery appliance that you've installed. One of the first things you'll have to do is either drop in the name or IP address of what the appliance is. You'll see it's already been pre-populated here because it includes the words VMware Data Recovery in the VM's name over here on the left. If I click the connect button after a minute or two, it'll actually connect me into the data recovery appliance and allow me to create backup and restore jobs. Now remember, this is a disk-to-disk based backup solution, so the very first thing that's required for you is to actually figure out what sort of destination you want to create as a location for storing your data. I've actually created here on the C drive a share called C and then backups. And then I've shared this out, so it's just your standard Windows share. And then once it's been shared out, you can actually go here into the configuration tab and right click to choose to add another network share. Now if you do so, you'll see that you get this error message reminding you that it's not a good idea to utilize network shares larger than a half a terabyte in size because of performance considerations. But once you make this connection here with the URL and a username and password, this can become one of a number of different locations that you can use for actually storing the different data that the backups will actually end up creating. There are other settings in here as well, some backup appliance, some general settings here. You can set your host credentials if you want. You can set up some email credentials here, some time information here, log information, those sorts of things. What you essentially want to do once you've got the configuration up and running is set up a backup job. Now these backup jobs are really no different than the backup jobs you're used to working with before in other types of technologies. You create a new backup job and give it a name, identify which of the virtual machines you may want to back up. Maybe it's an entire cluster, or maybe it's just one specific virtual machine. I'll choose VM6 here because I know that's a relatively small virtual machine. Give it a location where we want to back it up to, and then a schedule in which we want to run the backup job. A retention policy for how many of the backups we want to keep here in terms of few or more or many, or some policy custom details down here as far as the number of recent backups to retain, especially those older ones as well. If I click next and finish, that'll actually go about, well, doing that backup job. Now I'm going to pause the recording here for a minute to let this backup job complete. Whenever we get back, we're going to take a look at how the restore process works with these backup jobs. And we're back. As you can see here, I've got the backup job that was created, and in fact I actually went through and did two backup jobs, so you could take a look here at one for VM1 and one also for VM6. This is just information about this one backup job and what the latest one was. If I wanted to back up one of these, I could just select the VMDK file I'm looking for in the virtual machine, and then choose to restore that virtual machine, and then ultimately where I want that virtual machine to go. So choosing next here, we'll select where that destination will end up becoming. Now at this point, instead of actually going through that whole restore process, which can take a pretty extended period of time, what I want to do is disconnect here from the VMware Data Recovery appliance, because there's one more piece, however. So recognizing that the Data Recovery appliance creates a disk-to-disk backup that allows you to back up your virtual machines to some file share somewhere and ultimately restore them is great. But sometimes there comes that situation where you do have to actually grab individual files and folders off of those VMs. And in order to be able to do that, there's another tool in here that's required to support that additional functionality. And you have to go through this Explore Media link in order to be able to find it. That is the file level restore client that you can see here under WinFLR. Now, let me copy this out of here and put it onto the desktop so I can show you how this works. The WinFLR, or the file restore client, is something that you would actually launch inside of a virtual machine that you've backed up. And what it does is from within that virtual machine, it provides access to previously backed up files from that virtual machine. What you would do here is enter in the IP address or name of that virtual recovery appliance that's up and functioning, and it would provide access to you to see those specific files and folders that were backed up onto that disk location somewhere that is managed by the recovery appliance. In advanced mode, you can additionally restore files that were previously backed up from either this or any other virtual machine into this location. So the restore client here, the file restore client, somewhat different than what you're used to thinking of when you think of a unified backup solution. So you have the data recovery plugin that handles the backup and restore functions, and then this file level restore client that does these extra little functions for getting additional files and folders out of existing backups. Again, two-part solution for providing this. It's available from VMware. There are third-party solutions that sort of integrate all of these into a unified whole. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about the backup and restore process for virtual machines, and really from a more approach-based perspective, what are the different types of solutions you might use based off of the different needs you have for your vSphere implementation? We really talked about the different locations in terms of perspective in which backups can be sourced from in a virtual environment. You can go today with your existing backup solution and plug an agent right into that virtual machine and continue backing up like you always have. But what you're not going to get is that point-in-time backup that you would get from a solution like the VMware Data Recovery and its appliance. We talked about how we can work with virtual machine snapshots and how they are a useful tool for protecting yourself from doing something stupid. They're not that great a solution for backups. We also spent just a little bit of time with the two halves of the VMware Data Recovery appliance and plugin, as well as that file level restore additional piece that's required when you want to dig into those VMDK files to grab additional files. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.